Hello, friends. Welcome to the Ancient Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Motley, and today I have a very special guest with me here in the studio. It is Dr. Marty Makary, and he is the author of the extraordinary book, Blind Spots: When Medicine Gets It Wrong and What It Means for Our Health. It's already been a bestseller on the New York Times best-selling list, and he is a surgeon, he is an author, he is a teacher at Johns Hopkins University, and we were just talking about how he literally is doing surgery on individuals, and he's writing books, and he's touring, and he's actually been the author of over 250 basically scientific articles. And to me, somebody who's in the field, who's in the trenches, is somebody who really deserves our respect. So, Doc, thank you for joining us here today.
Good to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me.
I'm super glad. I'm super thankful. And I can't say this enough because one of the things that I was really impressed with the book is that you're on Megyn Kelly, and you started to talk about like peanut allergies. So we're going to go over this. I'm going to ask you a few questions. I want you to have free thoughts and free reign about what your book is about. But again, one of the biggest things was about peanuts, and you went deep into like peanut allergies. But the one thing I did notice about your style and about how you approached medicine was that you are a free thinker, and I can tell that you really analyze what's behind the surface or beneath the surface. So one of the things, I want you to talk to us about the blind spots. What brought it about? What's the meaning? We know it's the blind spots probably in how medicine's researched, but can you give us your insight into the blind spots?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Chris. Great to be here. And speaking of style, I like your style. You like to have fun and talk about questions other people don't talk about. Look, I think the purpose of science is to challenge deeply held assumptions, and we have a lot of those in medicine. As a matter of fact, we have an epidemic of medical dogma, and people get little pieces of it. You get a little sense of, this doesn't sound right. 3 glasses of cow's milk for every person in America every day until they die. Like, that's the actual recommendation. Like, where do they get that from, right? And so there's a lot of dogma. Now, we can try to dispel medical myths, but I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to explain the psychology of groupthink and how medicine can take on this herd mentality that sometimes turns into a mob mentality. If something doesn't fit their construct in the medical establishment, then you'll see this pile-on effect, and it can be devastating. You know, when people challenge deeply held assumptions, sometimes it's embarrassing for the medical establishment. And so there's a whole psychology to this groupthink, why we surrender our independent thinking sometimes as human beings and just sign up for the program. And so you see this time and time again. All of these doctors who are smart people and well-intended all believe that opioids are non-addictive for 22 years. All believe the food pyramid is the way to eat. All believe that the peanut allergy epidemic was just random or genetic. And you see these sort of giant, catastrophic medical mistakes in the modern era. It's not from an ancient time period. These are active groupthink mistakes that are affecting what people believe about their choices and their behaviors, and it's a real barrier. These blind spots are a real barrier to improving the health of the population.
With the blind spots, when you were finding out that there were like these gaps, because I've always thought that when you see advancements in science and technology, that somehow that this advancement in science and technology should improve our research capabilities, allow us to find the insight like, why would 3 glasses of milk be good for you if that was really the case? And then there's some research that it's not. When you found that these types of gaps were starting, when was it in your career did you start to notice? Like, was it pretty early on? Like you were thinking this started to challenge you a little bit?
Well, as a medical student, I had the privilege of doing research with a guy who was a very prominent physician at Harvard. And so I would make suggestions on the research team, and he was open to them. And I realized, as a student, I could run with the best of them. And you realize that sometimes these giant recommendations are just made up. You know, they're just what one person thinks. It's just one opinion. And we all bring our experiences and biases to our perspective. So I realized it's not like there's some higher authority where they're coming down from Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments. These are everyday people. They put on their pants one leg at a time like the rest of us, and they can make mistakes. And so that's when I thought, it's not this sort of sacred guild that you're not allowed to question. No, these people are everyday folks, and they can make the same groupthink mistakes as anyone.
No, because I think that you're right. Like in certain aspects, even in my realm, like there's people that are held in certain awe or respect, and to challenge it is like, no, you can't challenge. But when you started to realize that there was the need for something like this to be like addressed, what were some of the first patients like I want to hear like your experience. Like what was like one of the first things you said, okay, I'm going to challenge this, like an example, like a case?
Looking back, and I don't really spend a lot of time looking back, but one time after I gave a talk, somebody who is a psychologist was fascinated with my talk and pulled me aside and said, "You're a third culture kid." And I didn't know how to take that. Was that an insult or a compliment? I don't know what that meant. And a third culture kid is a kid who is from a different place than where you are currently living. You have this sort of sense of, do I belong to another culture? And so I was born in England. My family's from Egypt, and I was raised in the United States. And you're a third culture kid, as I've learned as well. And so third culture kids there's a couple of common characteristics. They feel like they're an observer in society, and they tend to be a little hyper observant. They notice things that other people may not notice because they feel like a visitor in society. And so, this is some analysis somebody offered up for free, but I do remember, like as a kid, everybody in our small town in rural Pennsylvania would go to the football games. And I just remember thinking, isn't this interesting how people just clash into each other, and this is considered fun, And I didn't make a value judgment, good or bad, but I noticed observing that, whereas other people are just like, hey, this is what we do. Yep. And then, so looking back, I realized I was asking some questions that nobody else was asking, say, even as a child. I grew up in a small town in a region of Pennsylvania that's a coal mine region, known for its anthracite coal that burns really well. And so 15 minutes or so from my house, on the way to the mall, I would notice there's smoke coming out of the ground. Everybody knew it was there. It was called, so I asked my mom, what is this? Like smoke coming out of the ground in many places, and it's always there. It didn't matter what year or when we go to the mall, it's always coming out. And she said, oh, that's the Centralia coal mine fire. It's been burning for years. It's going to burn for hundreds of years. They decided they're never going to put it out. It goes for miles and miles. They can't put it out. And they relocated a lot of people who live on top of it. So, I was like, what? Okay. I assumed everybody grew up near a coal mine fire. In America. I didn't know, right? You don't know what the reference is. So I'm a little kid. So it turns out my dad's a hematologist. And so he noticed high rates of certain types of leukemia that are not normally seen at those proportions in that town. Well, obviously, as a kid, I was like, well, what do you think, what's causing this? And Dad thought it was from these toxic exposures. And I assumed somebody's working on this. Somebody is going to figure out a way to get rid of those toxic exposures, or divert or cap or move people, or somebody's going to do the scientific analysis. And I realized no one's working on it. And I go to med school, nobody's working on it. And in med school, I notice how dismissive the medical school culture is to big questions. Wow. Unbelievably dismissive. So you learn things in med school that are like, whoa, wait a minute. The average age of puberty is going down by a week and a half every year for the last 30 plus years. It's now years sooner than it was just a century ago. And you stop and you ask why. In the sort of frantic busyness of med school, you're just like, what is that true? Okay, why? And it's dismissed. Oh, well, there's many different reasons no one knows. And you basically are told, put your head down, focus on memorizing the names of drugs and enzymes and anatomy parts, and then take your exam and regurgitate what you memorize. And you hear all of these highly objectionable things come up. And what I realize what was going on in med school is we were being conditioned, unintentionally. People there are well-intended, but we were being conditioned. Don't ask the big questions. Put your head down. Do your job. You will be rewarded. It's a bit of a trap because you go in this massive debt of like $500,000. And so you come out and you're, again, conditioned. Put your head down. Focus on your billing and coding. We're going to measure you by your throughput. And we haven't given doctors the time or resources, and we squashed their intellectual curiosity to address the root causes of all these diseases that are surging right in front of our eyes over my time from med school to today. All of these chronic diseases are surging. Autoimmune diseases, cancer rates in young people, colon cancer, rectal cancer. And no one is, to this day, nobody really is working on why. And we don't have people asking the big questions. So I have committed myself to focusing my research, my career, my platform to challenging the deeply held assumptions, asking the big questions, and pushing the field. So the old guard medical establishment that I'm deep into, I mean, I'm right there in the ivory towers at Johns Hopkins, tenured with all the professors, and it's like we have got to push the field and think differently.
I love the way you said crushing the curiosity of individuals for people to have like that inquisitive nature. And I can see that, like, and you said like a third culture kid. I think one of the things is like you always want to be able to prove yourself. And I can see that energy from you. It's like, I'm going to show that there are answers. What was the resistance, though? Like when you're at school and you're finding out these things, like there should not be quicker puberty. There should not have these things. Was there a big resistance or, a halt to you asking?
When you look at the macro, you think, gosh, this evil system is just profiting from all these medications and operations. But when you're on the ground, you realize it's far more innocent. It's sort of the complacency, right? So you have all these people that are just doing their jobs, but their jobs are really written wrong. The job descriptions are written wrong. We shouldn't just be memorizing and regurgitating. We should be doing other things. So you see these people well-intended, but for example, in anatomy class, one of the first few days of med school, we see a picture of the human lung in a cadaver, and you see different pictures, and in one of the pictures, it's black. I mean, you see through the dissection, the lung is just black. And your first reaction is, oh my God, I didn't expect a black organ in a normal appearing cadaver. And the professor, seeing the shock of all of us that are noticing it, addresses it and says, oh, that's very common among people who live in cities. It's just a characteristic of city dwellers. Their lung can turn black. And don't worry, it's not bad for you. What? And I thought, how dismissive. Okay, we didn't talk about what makes it black. We didn't talk about, are there any studies to show that it's not bad for you? Or are you just making it up? Or is that what you want to believe? And so you just see this kind of, that's what I was taught, pass the tradition on, and everyone's just getting through the system. Everyone's sort of a cog in the wheel. But what we need are people who say, whoa, wait a minute. This is something that we need to study and understand and address. I mean, some of these things are existential threats. Sperm counts have come down 50% in the last 5 decades. Right? We're not on a good path, and we're just going to medicate everybody and ignore these major problems. We have the most poisoned society in the history of the world right now. Wow. Our food supply. We've engineered highly addictive chemical ingredients added to food. We pour billions of gallons of pesticides on our food supply. They have sampled school lunch programs just a few weeks ago in the Washington, D.C. area where I live. And one school lunch had 38 different pesticides detected in it and showing up in the urine of kids. It's in the cord blood of newborns. Nobody's talking about this stuff. Not a soul. I mean, nobody in the world of clinical medicine. This is where we need to focus. This is where we need to put research dollars. This is where we need to address the root causes of childhood obesity, of autoimmune diseases, of all these conditions that are going up. Early onset Alzheimer's has tripled in the last 10 years. I mean, we spend so much time and energy talking about these billion-dollar Alzheimer's drugs. What about the root cause of why early onset Alzheimer's has tripled?
It's like, why would it actually start? Like, if it's not even addressed, I think that when you talked about triple the amount, 38 different pesticides, which leads me to this question. What is, with this type of toxicity, why is there such a higher rate of cancer rates increasing? Is that, I mean, I'm not saying it causes it. Is there you're seeing this more and more, is that right? And is there some links with toxicity to cancers and such, in your opinion?
Yeah, we're living in a toxic milieu. And I'm not saying this so people get depressed. I'm saying it so people can make better health decisions. So when you're buying fruits and vegetables, and especially when you're eating the surface of it, you want to buy organic. You don't want stuff loaded with these chemicals. Atrazine, well, there's glyphosate, atrazine. There's a bunch of these. Atrazine is a weed killer. Mm-hmm. Now, atrazine actually has hormone disrupting properties. And so atrazine has been found in this famous atrazine frog study to actually convert a female frog to a male frog. It can change the gender of a tadpole later in life. It's a hormone disrupting chemical. And it's in everything we eat. It's in corn and soybean. Think about all these seed oils now that are taking over. These are pro-inflammatory molecules. They sound healthy and they're not. Mm-hmm. Vegetable oil sounds healthy. No, they're heated and denatured. There's a chemical solvent, changes its structure. Mm-hmm. It's designed for a long shelf life. It's designed to be cheap. It's not designed for your health. They're pro-inflammatory. Well, we have all these things that are increasing body inflammation, changing the microbiome. If these pesticides are killing insects, what do you think they're doing to the microbiome, right? The millions of different bacteria. If fluoride is killing bacteria on teeth to reduce cavity rates ever so slightly, mm-hmm. What do you think it's doing to our microbiome bacteria? So when they thought, oh, let's just put fluoride in the drinking water because we have studies that lowers cavity rates. We're messing with Mother Nature. We have no idea what it's doing to the microbiome. Mm-hmm. And I know of smart dentists who avoid fluoride, that defluoridate their water. They have machines that defluoridate their water. Yes. But the CDC and the groupthink of the medical establishment, they believe that this is one of the greatest public health achievements in history. The CDC's website has a page, 10 greatest public health achievements in modern medicine. And fluoridation of water is on there. I mean, it's the cognitive dissonance, the pride, acknowledging that maybe they got this terribly wrong and actually caused health crises. It's a big barrier. So when they get big things wrong, mm-hmm. the food pyramid, natural fat causes heart disease. You should avoid peanut butter in your first 3 years of life. Opioids are not addictive. You don't see this reckoning, this vigorous correction with the same fervor at which they put out the initial recommendation. You see them kind of fade out, and I think that's because of the pride of these institutions.
That's why, Doc, because with the pride, I always think the best teachers are those individuals who are willing to sort of swallow their pride and say, hey, there's new research that says this is this, and we need to go down this other route. And I'm so glad that you're making the change, because you said, we're going to go to some questions, but you said this sold out in like the first day. Opening day, and you had to restock, because that would tell me that people are tired of going to their primary care physicians, and they'll say something, I have this type of eczema, I have this over here. Oh, that's not a problem. You just need to put this cream on there and you'll be fine. Right. And like, I want to get back to this thing about peanut butter, because like signs and symptoms, making cognitive decisions about like what could actually be causing a problem is what I could see in your book. So I wanted you to talk about the peanut butter. I just got to hit on this though, like about this study, because it was so good, because I heard on your interview. Can you tell the people about this peanut butter study and what it really does to your body?
Yeah, first of all, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I don't even think doctors know that some cases of acne and rosacea are treatable, can improve with changing what the one eats. Yes. You can actually use food as medicine, and you can reduce the amount of chemicals in one's life and affect positively some of these chronic conditions. And I think we just go straight to the medications. Yes. So the peanut story.
I got to hear this, but I want to go back to microbiome, but I want to hear this peanut story. This is so good.
Okay, so the modern day peanut allergy epidemic, which is real. Mm-hmm. People mock people who have severe allergies. They shouldn't. These are real. Mm-hmm. The modern day peanut allergy epidemic was ignited by the medical establishment in the year 2000. Mm-hmm. And for most of the last 25 years, the medical establishment has insisted that parents make sure no kid is exposed to peanut products, including peanut butter, until they turn 3. Where did they get that recommendation from? They made it up. They made it up. There was no good science to support it. I interviewed people who were involved in that recommendation for the book Blind Spots. They made it up. And they made it up because they felt like, well, we're the experts and people are asking us how to prevent peanut allergies. So, Marty, we had to tell them something. We had to tell them what to do. I said, no, you didn't. You didn't have to tell them what to do if you don't know. You can say, I don't know. That's the right answer many times. And so what they did is they told parents, make sure kids don't have any peanut butter or peanut products till they turn 3, thinking that would reduce the risk of developing a peanut allergy later. Mm-hmm. They forgot about a basic principle in immunology that had been long known of immune tolerance, or the old dirt theory. That is, when you're exposed to these allergens early in infancy, at 5-6 months of age, it is a sort of natural vaccine, if you will, and it reduces the risk of future peanut allergies. So by promoting this peanut abstinence for young kids, all these peanut allergies started to skyrocket, including a new type that we started to see increasingly common in the emergency department, which was the ultra-severe anaphylactic reaction. That is, a kid could be next to a peanut and start having hives and trouble breathing. And so when the medical establishment saw these peanut allergies spiking in the few years after their initial recommendation in the year 2000, they didn't show humility. They didn't say, hey, maybe we have this wrong. They didn't listen to a subset of doctors that were saying, hey, you made a terrible mistake. I mean, I cite doctors who wrote in articles, you may be creating a massive problem here. Instead, they doubled down. They thought, well, the problem here is people are not listening to us. We have to get more compliance. We got to double down. We got anti-science moms out there slipping peanut butter into their young kids. We've got to make sure everyone follows our recommendation. And so they pounded this into people for 15 years. Finally, one of the guys who originally objected did a basic study randomizing a small group of kids to early peanut butter exposure versus the peanut abstinence dogma of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And he found an 8-fold difference in peanut allergies just a few years later. Whoa. Radically different rates. And it makes sense. It makes sense. We don't see peanut allergies in Africa. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really not genetic. I mean, we blame oh, it's genetic. I mean, when you hear everything blamed on genetics, obesity, and smoking, I'm not saying there's no association there, but they are likely missing the real root cause. Smoking does increase the risk of several things. We know that. But obesity is an indicator of another problem, and that is a poisoned food supply. It's what people are eating. We're the only species with obesity. I mean, you don't see animals just have a random 20% rate of severe obesity, right? It's a byproduct of our modern ultra-processed food system with all these chemicals that are in it, and they're altering the microbiome. So we do this a lot in medicine. Dismiss things. Oh, it's obesity. In other words, AKA, it's their fault. They were bad. They were eating bad food. Genetics. Oh, it's no one's fault. That's kind of what that means. Tobacco, they're a bad person for smoking. And we do know smoking, it's bad behavior. But, I mean, there's other root causes that we're not talking about. So the peanut allergy story was incredible. When I went back and, in the book Blind Spots, I try to do investigative journalism where I go back and interview people.
Mm-hmm. And you actually show it, like in the book, like you went and you did it in an objective way. So when individuals see how you approach a problem, I'm very impressed with it. I mean, because I have to do things by steps, and I can tell, like, whenever you teach it so cleanly. Like, this is what I did, and this is how it presented itself. So things I'm so thankful for, and I know the listeners out there would be too, is how you even approach, like, hormones. There's so much different information about hormone therapy and about, like, the fear behind it. Can you touch a bit on that?
Yes. This is maybe the biggest screw up in modern medicine and the most important one for people to know about, because this is still an active dogma that is incorrect, that is popular, that is widely believed by both the public and by physicians. And that is a dogma that hormone replacement therapy for perimenopausal women increases your risk of dying of breast cancer. That dogma really took on a life of its own in an announcement 22 years ago by an NIH scientist. He held a press conference and he said, we just completed the largest study ever done in medicine, a $1 billion taxpayer-funded study on hormone therapy for women after menopause. And he said that we found that it increases the risk of breast cancer by 26%. It turns out he did not release his data for another 2 weeks. The media ran with the headlines. Women flushed their pills down the toilet or ripped off their little transdermal patch. Doctors called their patients that were taking it, saying, get off this thing right away. It's a carcinogen. Hormone therapy not only alleviates the symptoms of menopause, that is the perimenopausal symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, mood swings, weight gain. There's like 50 plus different symptoms of perimenopause. It also has, hormone therapy has long-term benefits for perimenopausal women who started within 10 years of the onset of menopause. Incredible long-term benefits. I mean, there may be no medication that improves the health of a population more than hormone therapy for perimenopausal women, arguably with the exception of antibiotics. Let me mention them really briefly. It increases nitric oxide. The estrogen increases nitric oxide, and the blood vessel walls are healthier. They're softer. They're going to be more dilated. And so the risk of fatal heart attacks is cut in half in women who take it. The risk of Alzheimer's goes down by 35%. The risk of cognitive decline, which is common in postmenopausal women, goes down by 50 to 60%. Their bones are stronger. It prevents osteoporosis. And so if a woman falls later and when a woman's in her 70s or 80s, they're far less likely to have a fatal hip fracture or even break a bone. And so the long-term health benefits are amazing. The short-term health benefits are right in front of our eyes. It alleviates many of these symptoms. But tragically, doctors will not prescribe this hormone therapy for perimenopausal women. 80% of doctors will not prescribe it because they perceive that it increases your risk of dying of breast cancer. When the guy made the announcement, He released no underlying data. When it came out 2 weeks later, there was no statistically significant increase in breast cancer mortality. It is one of the greatest screw-ups in modern medicine. And to this day, people still believe the original announcement. Doctors believe the original announcement. He misrepresented his data. In the book, Blind Spots, I tracked him down in retirement, had a long conversation with him.
You tracked him down.
I tracked him down. He was actually very polite, very nice guy. Very nice guy. Yeah. He sat down with me, and in a recorded conversation, he explained to me that he believes that hormone therapy causes breast cancer, even though his data does not show a statistically significant increase in the risk of dying of breast cancer.
So when he goes to that, and I think that you're saying even in the book, when you talk about that, many physicians, they can fall into that category, like they may have a belief system that drives their motivation to say, hey, this is what I believe. And why do you think that the doctors out there, like I guarantee you probably in his heyday, you could ask him something, he probably would resist it. Why do you think that doctors resist it though? I mean, that's decided, like there's such resistance. I know you said there's pride, but do you believe like the belief system of the doc, it just makes them like not want to change at all, like the people you've been around?
Belief systems are powerful. So what happened was when he made this announcement, you had the brands of the NIH, National Institutes of Health, Harvard, Stanford, all these major centers were co-authors on the study. It was published in the #1 medical journal. Even though in the article that people point to, it doesn't show it's statistically significant in terms of the risk of breast cancer. People still point to that. And so you've got these big brands. The Journal of the American Medical Association publishes the article. NIH, Stanford, Harvard, big announcement. Time magazine puts the guy on the cover. The media runs with the story. This was in 2002. The biggest news story at the time. Doctors, we get our information from the news, especially when the article's not even published. We think, gosh, this was the announcement. This is the press conference. NIH, Stanford, Harvard, published in JAMA. So everyone fell for it. The groupthink was powerful. And so there are estrogen receptors on breast cancer cells. And so doctors logically thought, if you give someone breast cancer, yeah, I could see how it increases. If you give someone estrogen, I could see how it increases breast cancer. There are estrogen receptors on practically every cell in the body, which is why hormone therapy has this incredible effect on the body, this positive effect. But yeah, it's a belief system. You know, there are things you're not allowed to question in modern medicine. You are not allowed to question the sacred cow topics. You are not allowed to question hormone therapy causes breast cancer. You're not allowed to question the 72 vaccine schedule, dose vaccine schedule for children. 72 different vaccines at different, total doses of the different vaccines in the childhood vaccine schedule. You're not allowed to question that. If you say, hey, do we need to be, I get these vaccines, but do we need to be giving the hepatitis B vaccine to newborn babies within hours of being born? Hepatitis B is contracted from IV drug use, and it's sexually transmitted. Do we need to be giving it to newborns in the hospital, in the labor and delivery room sometimes? So you are not allowed to ask those questions because it's a belief system. You believe in our vaccination concept, in the belief system of vaccines, or you don't. And if you're questioning this principle, then you are not a part of the tribe and you will get excommunicated. That is very unhealthy. Science has always been based on a civil discourse, and we have to challenge our deeply held assumptions in the absence of data.
So. I like the way you put that, in the absence of data, because when you're being a scientist internally, like you're trying to like go in and investigate, when you were seeing all these things come together, because you challenge the sacred cows, like do your friends, I just love asking these questions. Do your friends ever get upset with you? Like, and Johns Hopkins and anywhere?
I've had great relationships at Johns Hopkins. It's a great hospital. I've got great colleagues. There's a subset of doctors, and you kind of know who they are. They're also the type with these blind political allegiances who feel like, hey, you're hurting our brand out there. People could misconstrue this as doctors make mistakes and therefore I'm not going to follow my doctor. So you shouldn't be talking about this stuff publicly. Okay. And I'm thinking, no, look, we screwed up on hormone replacement therapy, we screwed up on opioids, we screwed up on peanut allergies, we screwed up on the food pyramid, we screwed up on antibiotics won't hurt you. I mean, there's so many things where we need to have an open discourse. And if you just sort of hide with all these mistakes, you will increase mistrust. And during the COVID pandemic, you know, there's an example. You had sacred cows you were not allowed to question in medicine, right? Yeah. During the COVID pandemic, trust in doctors and hospitals, this is according to a recent study in JAMA, trust in doctors and hospitals went from 71% just before the pandemic down to 40%, a 31-point drop in trust in my profession. Wow. I need my patients to trust me, especially in emergencies, right? And when you are dishonest, when you change the messaging, when you are trying to protect the brand so much you ignore new research that's evolving, people are smart and they see through it, and it results in more distrust. If you don't like an idea, offer more ideas. Don't censor and shut down and, you know, shut down civil discourse.
I think that when there's fear about if information may get out there and disprove what you believe. I've always been taught, like some of my best mentors have always told me, it's like, you know, don't ever be afraid to be, you know, proven that something you believe is not actually like the way. And so I'm really thankful, because whenever you talked about antibiotics and about the microbiome and challenging that, because it's in a realm that I'm, you know, so deeply in love with, is like learning about how it affects the whole body. Could you touch a bit on that? Because that's one part I really did like about the book, is like the antibiotics, like it didn't cause problems. Because I know you've seen it with your patients and such. I have patients that say, hey, like I see the good in antibiotics, how it's helped so many people. And then I've had some individuals that said, hey, I took that and it caused complete amount of rashes. My life hasn't been the same. So could you touch a bit on that too?
Yeah, and I love your question, because this is an important principle. If we're being open-minded, is there's nuance in everything. So, for example, you see the over-medication of the population in America today. So it's easy to then swing back and retaliate in your mind and go to the other extreme and think all medications are bad. That's not true. It's nuanced, right? Yes, we are over-medicated, but yes, medications can do amazing things. Yes, pharma is driven by the profit motive, but yes, pharma can also produce some amazing medications, right? Hormone therapy is an example. People would come up to me who read the book Blind Spots and be like, wait a minute, I thought you were anti-pharma, but you're saying that there's benefits to taking hormone therapy in the perimenopausal period. Well, it's not all or nothing. There's no extreme, and antibiotics are the perfect example. Antibiotics save lives. You and I have seen it. But they're also massively overused. And what's happening is when you take an antibiotic, is you're carpet bombing the microbiome, the garden of millions of different bacteria that live in a harmony. And those bacteria are involved in they're busy. They're not just sitting there. They are busy working. They're involved in digestion and absorption. They produce vitamins. They are involved in the uptake of medications that people take. They produce a little bit of Ozempic. They produce a little GLP-1, some of those bacteria. They deconjugate estrogen. They are training the immune system. The immune system is so proximate to these bacteria. And when you get some leaky gut, that is the tight junctions in the gastrointestinal lining get weakened by pesticides, create leaky gut. That's how they kill insects. What do you think they're doing to our guts, right? Gluten creates a little bit of leaky gut, and a bunch of other things. General inflammation. We know seed oils are pro-inflammatory. So what's going on is the immune system is reacting. It's responding to these bacteria with an inflammatory response is you put all these chemicals down, you mess up the composition of that garden of microbiome. The immune system there, which is normally trained by the bacteria in the gut, are now reacting to the gut. It's not an acute inflammatory storm. It is a low-grade constant inflammation. It's like always there. It's nagging. And I'll tell you, when a tract, especially any lumen in the body, is inflamed, it hurts like hell. The ureter, people think it's the kidney stone that's scraping along that causes that famously intense pain. People describe it as the worst pain anyone ever experiences. It's not the jagged edges going down there. It's the dilation of the ureter from blocking. Okay? Biliary pain, right? Biliary pain, same thing. Your gallstone blocks the bile duct, and it's that stretching and inflammation of the duct. That is the intense pain that people feel. Bowel obstructions, right? And so when you inflame your GI tract, you feel sick. And sometimes people are constantly feeling sick. And this chronic abdominal pain, modern Western medicine doesn't know what to do with it. We can't operate on it. We don't know. There's no medication that we know. Now we got some of these expensive IV infusions that are just generically reducing inflammation. And they're advertising them like crazy on TV right now with everybody dancing in the fields. But no one's talking about the root causes, and that is we are altering the microbiome, and it's driving some of this inflammation. And so antibiotics are one of those factors that are altering the microbiome. And in the most amazing study I've seen in the last 10 years, researchers at the Mayo Clinic looked at 14,000 kids and compared those who had an antibiotic in the first couple of years of life versus those who didn't. Remember, the first couple of years of life are the key foundational years when that microbiome is forming. The kids who took an antibiotic in the first couple of years of life had a 20% higher rate of obesity. And farmers have been noticing this for a long time, right?
Really?
You give animals antibiotics, they're fatter. That's why they do it routinely, sadly, in agriculture. 32% higher rate of attention deficit disorder.
Heavens.
Yeah. Some of those bacteria are making serotonin. Most of your serotonin comes from those bacteria in the microbiome. When you're altering and messing with Mother Nature, changing that microbiome from a whole host of things, not just antibiotics, C-sections change the microbiome. Instead of the microbiome being formed initially with seeded bacteria from the birth canal, in a C-section, a sterile baby with a sterile gut is extracted from a sterile operative field, and what may seed their microbiome are the bacteria that normally live in the hospital. Sheesh. And then it's augmented with other breast milk, and so lack of breastfeeding changes the microbiome. So these things I never once heard a wink about any of this in med school or in my residency or on the faculty at Johns Hopkins as a gastrointestinal surgeon. And it's driving cancer rates. It's driving so many things. As a matter of fact, there was a study that just came out that kids, you know about the increase in colon cancer in people under 50? It's going up. Yes, it's going up. So colon cancer is going up in young people under 50. A study just came out that found kids born by C-section were more likely to have colon cancer before age 50 than kids not born by C-section. Again, C-sections save lives. I'm not saying go into the woods and have your baby with no medical attention. That's dangerous. But we're messing with the microbiome in so many ways, right? Antibiotics, C-sections, ultra-processed foods, pesticides, atrazine, glyphosate, all this stuff. And no one is bold, honest, courageous enough to actually talk about this incredible association with all of these chronic diseases we're watching go up right in front of our eyes. We're so busy billing and coding and operating and medicating, we can't see the forest from the trees.
And I'm thankful, like when we talk about these kind of issues, like these are the questions that people want to hear, because do you see in the future, like you've brought it to the surface, you brought this problem that they're seeing in research. Do you find it that it'll take a long time for like, big schools like Johns Hopkins or Harvard, to like sort of look into like if a child who goes through C-section could have like stomach cancer? Do you think that there are people out there that are inquisitive enough and that they're going to try to challenge the system, if I could put it that way?
People ask me, why do you write books? And this is why I write books, to accelerate that understanding of this deeply needed issue of we have to look at these issues. So a bunch of us are going straight to the public. We're coming on your podcast. We're writing books. Casey Means is out there. Casey and Kelly Means have a great book called Good Energy. There's a bunch of great books. Mark Hyman, Peter Attia. There's a bunch of a bunch of us are going straight to the public, because if we leave it to the medical establishment, they are not going to fix healthcare on their own. If you look at the track record of the last 50 years of the American healthcare establishment, it's been a failure. Chronic diseases have skyrocketed. Sure, yeah, we're good at doing operations and we're good at emergencies. But you look at the health of the public in the last 50 years, it's been a disaster, catastrophic disaster. The NIH decides really what doctors do research on, along with pharma. Pharma is not interested in this stuff, right? Yeah. The NIH, the dinosaurs at the NIH, I mean, we learned where their money has been going during COVID. Yeah. A lab in Wuhan to study bat coronaviruses. How about studying school lunch programs? How about studying the pesticides that showing up in the urine of school children, right? So I think it's going to be slow if we just let the medical establishment, work at their own pace. Most of our government agencies are captured by industry. So we need the public to be educated. We need people to understand these issues, to talk to their school boards, to get involved, to, a movement. And it's happening. We're seeing a movement.
I think there's a big movement. I think I've seen more and more there people's thoughts and minds are changing like that. I would never thought that would be more, more allopathic. And I've seen some of my friends who have started to think, maybe that there are shifts in the way we should think about medicine. And that's what I'm thankful when they asked me, I would love to be able to talk to you about these kinds of issues, because I could tell you like to challenge in a positive way, not in you're very smart, you tell people, and people out there, I want you guys truly, in his book, he explains it in such a way that you're gonna this is what you're gonna say, why didn't I ever think of it like that before? And that's how I did on many of these things. When you're talking about what you're seeing in the realms with Callie and Casey, Dr. Casey Means, they're all out there, and you guys are out there in the forefront. Do you feel? I know I'm always very cautious about how I ask questions about medicine with other physicians, because you guys are the experts. Do you feel that even when we're talking about changing the microbiome, will there ever be a time too that emotions or the way our psychology will meld and mix with modern medicine, this way of thinking could cause you to have a sickness of any sort? Do you think that'll ever happen?
It needs to happen, because there's clearly an association there. They did a study looking at positively complimenting other people with a smile has a therapeutic effect on the person doing the complimenting. So if you see somebody and say, hey, I just wanted to tell you, I saw the project you worked on. It was amazing. Thank you for doing that. And you do that with a positive attitude, you are getting an effect on your own physiology, on your own mental health that's the equivalent of multiple antidepressants.
Yeah. That is really, really amazing. And when you see those kind of effects, because we say in the Chinese medicine world, we always say that your psychology it sets up these programs. It's the qi that actually creates a circuit with the organ, and the way you think about a particular event or a place or a thing creates a circuit with that organ. And it does come down to, many times, how do you perceive the world? And your organ can actively function by how you perceive the world. And I always thought one day, in medicine, and it's going to be all coming together. So I'm really thankful that we see doctors like you doing the work that you're doing. So when you go back to the office, when you go back to the surgery table, I want to know though. I know what is your day like when you get back? You're like, truly, like, I got to go do some surgeries and I've got to do that. Do you just go back and it's just like a list of like surgeries and you're like, I got to do this, and I got to go to speaking? And is that how your days are usually?
I got a lot of variety. I love my job. I've got, I think, 5 operations I'm doing next week. I've got clinic for half a day. I've got a couple speaking things each month. I try to limit the amount of travel that I do, but I love getting in front of audiences and sharing with them all of this incredible medical research that experts have done in so many different areas of medicine, but they don't really have a platform for this incredible research to get to the public or to get to doctors in their conferences. So I use my platform to really share the incredible research of so many scientists out there. But it's a lot of variety. I do a lot with the policymakers on both sides of the aisle. I'll advise them. Right now, we're trying to talk a lot about the importance of addressing our food supply in America, right? Yes. We can't keep, you think about what we're doing to America's children. It's tragic and almost comically insane at the same time. We take a kid and we destroy their circadian physiology by getting them up early when they're exhausted, in the dark, putting them at a bus stop. We mess up their circadian rhythm. We feed them ultra-processed foods, cereals with food dyes that are banned in Canada. That's why Kellogg makes a version of Fruit Loops for Canada where they use fruit juices, literal fruits, to color the cereal. And in the U.S., they use chemicals to color the cereal. Things like tartrazine, which is a byproduct of coal tar, and it's known to cause hormonal disruption and attention deficit disorder. These are scientific findings that have been out there. They've discovered after they made it from coal tar that it can make fabric a bright yellow. So then they just started adding it to food, and it's called Yellow Number 5. It has this cutesy name on the cereal box. So Kellogg's makes 2 versions of their cereal. The more dangerous, less healthy one is in the United States for American kids. Then they go to school. They get probably some general body inflammation from all these chemicals. Then we hit them hard again with a massive refined carbohydrate, ultra-processed sugar load at lunch. Then they kind of have a food coma. They won't sit sedentary at a desk for 7 hours a day. And what do? We medicate them for that reason. And it's like somebody has got to step back and look at what we are doing.
Yes. Right? Yes. You got to look back, and it fires me up internally because whenever you see like young kids who got injured and hurt or from just eating the wrong way. And I don't say this lightly. I know we're not doc. Like, I remember one time I was in an airport, and in no way am I making light of children who have high inflammation or obesity, but two kids, you could tell truly they were walking side by side, and their knees were so, you could tell their knees hurt. They were young, and they were probably like 7 or 8 years old, and they had so much extra weight that their knees were starting to buckle in. And I thought, again, my heart goes out to them, but it's just like the culture of like, when I was younger, we used to eat Lunchables or something of that sort. And I always thought, but by the time I get older, I'd hope that they would change like the school lunches. And I was really, really surprised. One of the schools here in Tennessee, I'm not naming any names, they'd have like a cafeteria, and some of them were for just like kind of the normal cafeteria, but if they had like some high performance athletes, they go to the other cafeteria where they had better food. And you go, why would they do that? Why would they do that? And but it's not like, it's a blatant neglect. It's just like there must be studies that they knew that, this kind of food helps your performance. With this, though, Doc, I mean, you're talking all around the world, and you're seeing these things come to pass. Are you when the culture of medicine, what do you think it's going to be like? I mean, with you, I know you're going to be on the forefront of it. What do you see the culture of medicine being like? Do you think it's going to be stubborn for a very long time, or?
I find, so Casey Means had a big impact on me. I've never heard anyone explain what's wrong with American healthcare as succinctly as she did. And she's a physician. She's like me. She's a surgeon. And I thought, gosh, this is how we need to message what's wrong with healthcare today. Yes. Because the stakeholders in healthcare are just blaming each other. Yeah. Pharmacy benefit managers are blaming employer groups and insurance, and pharma is blaming PBMs, and hospitals are blaming lawyers and insurance companies are blaming. It's this crazy blame game. And the sick thing is everyone's getting rich, except for one stakeholder, and that is the American worker. Oh, wow. And they're financing this whole giant, expensive system where no one's actually talking about the root causes. So I think good stuff is happening. I think a bunch of us now are trying to educate the public. We're educating those of us that are physicians, trying to educate the medical community, again, using their language of scientific studies and the medical literature. Mm-hmm. I think they've got 400 some references, citations in the book Blind Spots. A lot of doctors have read it just in the few weeks it's been out and have reached out to me. It's been really encouraging. It's been moving, actually, to get some of this feedback. Like, they can tell something is wrong about the hamster wheel of being a doctor today, this kind of crazy whack-a-mole system we play. No one's talking about the root causes. And so they can tell something's not right. They don't like the direction of modern medicine. They feel like it's on the wrong track. Mm-hmm. And so we're tapping into something there, and it's just amazing. When I give a talk to doctors and I see all these light bulbs go off, It's like, they're hungry for this stuff, right? They know that they've not been told the full story. They know they had 1 hour of nutrition education in med school, and most of it was misinformation from the old food pyramid. They know we're not talking about these root causes. They know there's some underlying driving force between all of these chronic diseases going up, and they know they're not being, given the time or resources to explore it. And so we are seeing a bit of a revolution right now within the medical field. I hope it keeps going. We need more people to get off the hamster wheel of just billing and coding and seeing patients in short visits. But I think good stuff's happening. I'm encouraged.
I'm encouraged too. I'm with you, Doc. I think that when we talk about the short visits, I feel for the physicians that have to go through something so quickly that, in the hospital, you can only 15 minutes or 5 minutes to sit with somebody. And my heart goes out, and I'm so thankful to physicians such as yourself, because people think that I'm in Chinese medicine world and all I do is just do herbals and that's all I do. I was like, no, modern medicine saved me. I had a ruptured ulcer in 2017, and the doctor that helped me, one of the things that he was that brought insight, I knew I've been doing a clean diet and such, but I knew when I was younger, I just hope and pray that a parent picks up this book and reads it, because my parents didn't know any better. I was eating so much sugar when I was a kid. I used to take Chloraseptic with me to school because I had such bad sore throat, and I had strep, and I had all this digestive. I'd take Gaviscon and drink Gaviscon at school. My teacher would let me do that because I had such bad yeast overgrowth and bacteria. But, when I look back and I had the surgery, I was like, those things, something was left there and it popped open. And to me, the hope and prayers, I'm so thankful, is that when you read the book, it shows the evidence behind it that this stuff is harming the gut. It's harming kids. And so I just want everybody out there, truly out there, we're going to put this on our link on our show notes. We're going to make this available. I'll put it on the storefront so that you guys can get this opportunity to come and get this, because it is one of the books that would be something that I would give to somebody who would try to say, oh, no, everything's fine. And I'm like, I don't think everything's fine, honestly. So, Doc, I know your time's precious. I really am thankful that you came by. Your spirit's soft. You just got a good heart, I can tell. And where can people find you? I really wanted to know. I know that they can see online, but what's your feed on social media and on your website?
Yeah, so I'm on all the social media platforms, LinkedIn and Twitter. I probably check the most frequently, but I'm on Instagram and everything. And then martymd.com is where I try to post some of the latest articles. The book's available wherever books are sold. I love what you just said, though, about using science. I think one flaw in the culture of medicine today is that they believe science is narrowly defined as a randomized controlled trial, which is a study design intended to evaluate the effectiveness of a singular intervention like a medication. And it's a great study design, but it doesn't work when you have 1,000 chemicals in the U.S. food supply that are banned in Europe, and we have to understand what's happening. That model doesn't work. You're not going to isolate one of those ingredients for a 10-year randomized trial. We don't need a randomized trial to know that when half of 1% of the brain's weight is now microplastics, that's not right. That's not good. Okay, maybe we don't need to wait for that randomized control trial. We can act on our wisdom until we have better evidence, and I think we can learn from outliers. When I have a patient, I tell them they have cancer. I do a lot of pancreatic work. I have done a lot of pancreatic cancer. I tell somebody they have pancreatic cancer. They're less interested in the median survival. They're more interested in what's the chances of a cure. And if we can identify the outliers who are living now 20 years out from pancreatic cancer, despite having an aggressive form at an early stage, what happened? What did they do? Right? What's going on there? When you have somebody who lives to 110 years of age, what were they doing? What was their community like? What were their relationships and food and exposures and air and the water, right? And I think medicine has gotten so intoxicated with the randomized controlled trial dogma that is the only form of science. It is an effective form of studying questions, but we can learn from our patients. We can learn from outliers. Do we have time for a quick? Okay, good.
I keep going, Doc.
Okay, good. Well, I just love talking about this stuff. There's an amazing case at Johns Hopkins. I'll anonymize it for patient protection, although this case has been presented at numerous conferences. And it's a patient who came in with a incurable brain cancer, grade 4 glioblastoma multiforme, GBM, well known to be incurable. Essentially incurable, right? Ultra rare cases of surviving to, long term. They have a long-term survivor in the practice, the neurosurgeons, of such an aggressive cancer. And when you go back, sometimes when you hear these miracles, they were misdiagnosed. But actually, they've reviewed the pathology slides numerous times, and it was at stage 4 glioblastoma multiforme. Turns out after surgery, after they resected the tumor, the patient got an infection, bacterial infection of the tumor bed. They went back in after surgery and did the standard procedure of clearing the infection by opening up the skull plate, irrigating the bed where the infection was, the abscess was, and then in a second stage procedure, put the skull plate back on, and the guy did fine. Something happened. The bacteria either sparked a targeted immune response that may have, this is my hypothesis, that may have been essentially immunotherapy to the remaining tentacles of the cancer that have notoriously stay behind after you remove a GBM tumor. Or maybe the bacteria did something. Something happened. And so here's an individual case where we can learn something, right? It doesn't fit the randomized controlled trial model, but maybe we can learn something. And I think you summarized it best when you said early on, that the number one quality of a human being is their humility, evolving your belief and views as you get more information, being open-minded, recognizing that part of the human condition is just holding on to what we hear first, not because it's more logical, but simply because it's what nested in our brain first, right? That is a bias. And the father of modern medicine implored all scientists, this guy Claude Bernard, to recognize that we all bring biases to every question and issue in the world. It's just a nature of the fact that we all have experiences. But he said we have to acknowledge that we have biases and then actively suspend those biases as we hear new information to be as objective as possible, to be impeccably objective. And that's what truly defines being open-minded. Because 100% of closed-minded people perceive that they are open-minded. Right?
Doc, I love the way you put that, because I think that I remember as an old adage that it reminds me of, like one of my mentors used to always tell me. He would say, you know, you have to realize that as you get older, you know that you don't know all of the things that you thought you did when you're younger, but when we learn and you let your experiences be your teacher. He says, let your experiences be your teacher. And I realized after 10 years, I mean, that's just, a little glip in practice, but I'm so thankful that whenever I racked up all that experience, it kind of squashed all like my old beliefs. You know what I mean? Like I had all these thoughts. I'm like, no, experience beats it all. So, Doc, I mean, seriously, I'm thankful for that, because I can tell, and I'm not saying that to butter you up. I can tell you really have a heart for this. And guys, if you're out there, I'm just saying you need to read his book, because he does have this truly a warmth of like really caring for people. And you can just feel it from when he's saying his passion for it. So my biggest thing is when you find passionate people, and they do it with humility, that's somebody you pay attention to. So, Doc, I'm just going to say I want everybody out there to grab his book. He's a very smart man. He does surgeries. He's going back and doing surgery this coming week. And, I feel like whenever I go back to the office, I usually talk to people about parasites, and he's going to go and just do some surgery. So guys, we're really thankful, Doc, for you joining us here today. Everybody check him out on social media and get his book. He also has another book that I think is really great. I just want to tell you guys about this, but it talks about the modern practice of medicine, about some of the travesties, about the spending, and about how it has created deficits, and it's a really good book. So check out all his books, okay? It's very eye-opening. It's very science-based. I am thankful that you joined us here. I hope one day when you do your next book, you come join me again. I'm not kidding.
Thank you, Chris. Really enjoyed it.
This is great. This is fun. All right, guys, from everybody here at the Ancient Health Podcast, I'm your host, Dr. Chris Motley. Until next time, have a blessed day.